Hey, welcome back to Everyday Economics, the podcast that helps you learn about the economic world happening around you every day. I'm your host, Chris Krug, president of the 501c3 nonprofit, nonpartisan Franklin News Foundation. Everyday Economics is a production of America's Talking Network. You can check out all of our great podcasts at americastalking.com. We are recording today's episode on Monday, May 22nd. And joining me as always, my friend, my colleague, Dr. Orphe Divounguy is a PhD economist. Real quick question. Is there just a little bit of disagreement inside of the Federal Reserve with regard to Fed Chairman Jerome Powell and his thinking, and perhaps some of the local Fed presidents? James Bullard, for example, in St. Louis, has had some things to say. Lori Logan from Dallas, the Fed president there, has had some things to say. Obviously, you want independent thinking, inside of a governing body. It shouldn't be a choir. But is there disagreement about the levers that have been pulled and what needs to be done next?
I think this is actually better for the Fed, that we have a couple of members who are hawkish. And then you have Jay Powell, who wants to keep his options open. I don't think there's any disagreement whatsoever. I think what they're doing is they want to keep their options open. So you're going to have a couple members who have historically been very hawkish, like James Bullard, president of Federal Reserve Board of St. Louis. Neil Kashkari actually also came out, Minneapolis Fed president, expressing, this concern that inflation might still be too high and that a June pause may not signal the end of the hiking cycle, right? So you have, those guys come out and the market implied probability of another 25 basis point hike jumps from near 0 to 28%. People take them very seriously. They're very, very smart and talented people. Now you had, in the contrary, right, of a different opinion, you had Fed Governor Philip Jefferson, who's also been tapped by the Biden administration as the next vice chair, expressing what we've expressed on the show a few times, which is that monetary policy works with long and variable lags, and that demand will likely soon feel the full effect of the record 5.25 percentage point increase, 5 percentage point increase, almost 5.25, because if we hike in June, increase in the Fed funds rate. So, that's something to consider. Then there's also another thing to consider is this Fed's quarterly survey of senior loan officers that came out saying half of loan officers reported tightening in lending to businesses. Yeah, look, households are already feeling the pinch. Businesses are also now not getting the kind of funding that they need to expand their operations. You're seeing job openings decline. You're seeing the labor market soften somewhat. Still hot, but coming down quickly, in my opinion. And I think that's why Jay Powell came out on Friday and said, look, until very recently, we thought we would need to firm up policy even more. However, policy has now become restrictive. And now the risks of doing too much versus too little are becoming more balanced, right? So he thinks that they've likely done enough, but he then adds, we need to keep looking at the data. And I think Chair Powell is right. We need to see the data coming in. We're going to have PCE inflation data coming on Friday, and then we're going to have the May employment data come in right after that, all before the next Fed meeting. And I think the Fed's going to be paying close attention to wage growth, close attention to where core PCE ends up next Friday. The tightening on the banking turmoil that's causing kind of credit tightening is definitely something to be concerned about. But I think ultimately inflation has shown that it's coming down. And I think American consumers are so resilient that we're probably not going to see that recession that everybody's calling for, and that we're headed towards that soft landing. So that kind of sums it all up. I think they're very much in agreement. It's just that they want to keep their options open, right? I think that's why they don't want the market, because remember, if the market starts to believe that the Fed is done, yields start to come down and right. And so this loosening begins, and that actually could cause inflation to increase, right? So having yields high enough to keep restricting some of the activity, the economic activity, is necessary to keep inflation down. So they don't want the markets to think, hey, the Fed's done, let's go and invest and spend, right? So yields have to be high enough to maintain kind of this restrictive stance in order for inflation to keep coming down.
Yeah, it's fascinating. I mean, in the process by which, the Fed makes its decisions, one thing I would just recommend, that the Fed did for the benefit of all Americans was to make some of that decision making a little bit simpler, or to provide it in simpler terms. I mean, fact of the matter is that in the last X number of Fed meetings, going back to I believe it's like to March of 2022, every time they meet, they've raised the rate. I guess to what end? Does the American, the average American understand that? I'm not sure. I mean, I still feel like, that most Americans look at the economy as if it's like the Wizard of Oz behind the curtain. They don't understand what the Federal Reserve does. And absolutely no criticism of Jerome Powell. I think this is simply the stance and sort of the posture of all Fed chairmen. Not a lot of explanation in terms that regular people can understand.
Yeah, I think regular people just see it in their daily lives, right? The cost of everything, including the cost of credit cards and mortgages, and but that's where it's felt, right? We see it in those credit card rates, and then we stop spending, and inflation comes down. That's kind of how it works.
For Orphe Divounguy, this has been Chris Krug. Subscribe to Everyday Economics and dozens of other quality podcasts at americastalking.com.